Welcome to Speaking History, where we unravel the truths behind the most intriguing and often chilling tales of the past. In this episode, the eighth in our True History series, we journey into the shadowy depths of deception, manipulation, and saintly facades. From the eerie farmhouse by Lake Eildon to the controversial legacy of Mother Teresa, we explore how charisma and power can blur the lines between heroism and exploitation. Brace yourselves for a narrative that questions perception and unveils the often overlooked realities behind history's most celebrated and condemned figures. For years, whispers surrounded the mysterious farmhouse by Lake Eildon, 200 kilometers from Melbourne, Australia. Neighbors spoke of eerie happenings, blonde-haired children glimpsed near the woods, stories of a cult, and a journalist's failed attempt to uncover the truth in 1985. But it wasn't until a federal police raid in August 1987 that the horrifying reality came to light. Behind a concealed door, police discovered 14 children dressed identically, their hair bleached blonde. Huddled in a windowless room, they were terrified, taught to believe police were murderers. They were told their parents were AnneHamilton-Byrne, a glamorous yoga teacher claiming to be Jesus Christ, and her husband, Bill. Anne convinced them they were chosen to inherit the earth after an impending apocalypse. But in truth, many of these children weren't hers. They had been taken or illegally adopted from cult members. Anne's life was built on lies. Born Evelyn Grace Victoria Edwards in 1921, her childhood was marked by tragedy. Her schizophrenic mother, claiming to be a medium, was institutionalized after a psychotic episode, and her father couldn't care for the children. Raised in an orphanage, Anne later fabricated an elaborate backstory, claiming royal lineage and a privileged upbringing. By the 1950s, Anne had reinvented herself as a yoga teacher, attracting Melbourne's elite with her charisma and piercing gray eyes. Her ability to manipulate and flatter drew followers into her orbit. As yoga gained popularity in the West, she leveraged its mystique, blending spirituality with pseudoscience to create her cult, the Family. Anne's teachings were a mix of apocalyptic prophecy and psychological control. Followers believed in her divine claims, surrendering their children, wealth, and lives to her. Her grip was ironclad. Her charm masked a deeply abusive regime. Globally, yoga and alternative medicine boomed in the mid-20th century, fueled by Cold War fears and a search for meaning. However, like many movements, they became breeding grounds for exploitation. Anne used this fascination to mask her true intentions: greed and control. When the truth emerged, it shocked Australia. The children Anne claimed to protect were instead victims of neglect, manipulation, and abuse. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of how charisma and deception can lead to unimaginable harm. AnneHamilton-Byrne's cult thrived because of the powerful and intelligent enablers around her. Until her death in 2021, she insisted her critics were the villains and portrayed herself as a savior. This unsettling narrative of manipulative individuals masquerading as saints has repeated throughout history, none more chilling than the story of Jimmy Savile. When Savile died in 2011, he was celebrated as a national treasure. His eccentric personality, charitable endeavors, and career as a beloved TV host painted a glowing public image. From running marathons and bike races to raising £10 million for Stoke Mandeville Hospital, his contributions seemed extraordinary. He had keys to Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital, led task forces, and was even knighted by the Queen in 1990. His funeral drew thousands, and his headstone listed accolades such as philanthropist, TV presenter, and friend to countless causes. But beneath the medals and applause lay a horrifying truth. Savile was a predator, abusing vulnerable children, women, and men for decades. Over 214 offenses have been confirmed, though the actual number is likely much higher. His victims ranged from young children to elderly patients, some even in hospital morgues where he bragged about defiling the dead. Saville used his charity work and faith as a smokescreen. He groomed the public, influential leaders, and even popes, creating a facade of holiness. He handed out medals and fostered an image of himself as a benevolent figure, a modern-day saint. Yet his devout Catholic persona was a calculated lie, designed to shield his monstrous acts. Saville's story reveals how unchecked power and public trust can enable horrifying abuses. History is rife with similar examples. From AnneHamilton-Byrne's manipulation to the atrocities of World War I, justified under the guise of a just war. Faith and charity, in the wrong hands, can become weapons for those who seek to exploit and harm. And this leads us to another complex figure, cloaked in sainthood, Mother Teresa. From the 1970s until her death on September 5, 1997, just one day before Princess Diana's funeral, Mother Teresa was a global icon. Clad in her simple blue and white sari, this diminutive figure became one of the century's most revered religious and moral leaders, standing beside figures like Pope John Paul II. She was celebrated as a living saint, a symbol of sacrifice and humility, embodying the ideals of Christianity. For many, she was the altruist's altruist, dedicating her life selflessly to the service of others. Tributes poured in worldwide after her passing. French President Jacques Chirac mourned, "This evening there is less love, less compassion, less light in the world." U.S. President Bill Clinton called her one of the giants of our time. Indian Prime Minister E.K. Gujral expressed his sorrow, calling her an apostle of peace and love. Even Britain's Queen Elizabeth noted she would continue to inspire those touched by her work. 2 years later, in 1999, a Gallup poll ranked her as the most admired person of the 20th century, placing her above Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy. During her life, she received over 120 awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize, 1979, the Pope John XXIII Peace Prize, 1971, and the British Order of Merit, 1983. Despite her humility, claiming she was not worthy of such accolades, she accepted them with grace, including traveling first class to Oslo to receive her Nobel Prize. Her legacy also lives on through her memorable quotes, often shared today on social media and in publications. Statements like, "A life not lived for others is not a life," and "I'm a little pencil in the hand of a writing God," continue to inspire millions. These words, much like her deeds, carry an almost divine weight when attached to her name. But fame can obscure as much as it reveals. While Mother Teresa was no monster, her image as a saint often masked a more human and complex reality. Behind the iconic blue and white sari was a story not just of selflessness, but also of controversy and shadows. A reminder that even halos can cast long, dark shadows. Angeze Gongsha Bojakshiu, known to the world as Mother Teresa, was born on August 26, 1910, in Skopje, then under the Ottoman Empire, now North Macedonia. Her early years were marked by Albania's political unrest and personal tragedies. Blood feuds claimed the lives of her great-grandfather, great-uncle, and grandfather, while her father, Nicole, a nationalist businessman, was poisoned in 1919. His death left Angeze, her mother Rosa, and 2 siblings in a deeply patriarchal society where women had no inheritance rights. Struggling to survive, they relied on relatives until the Spanish flu struck in 1919, wiping out much of their extended family. Left with little but faith, Angeze found solace in religion. At 18, she experienced what she described as a calling to serve God. But was this purely spiritual or a practical escape from limited prospects in a male-dominated society? In 1928, she joined the Sisters of Loreto in Ireland, learned English, and prepared for her mission in India. A year later, she arrived in Darjeeling, taking the name Teresa after Sainte Thérèse of Lisieux. Teresa became a teacher in Kolkata and rose to headmistress of St. Mary's School, a role she cherished. Yet in 1946, during a train journey to Darjeeling, she felt a profound call within a call. Witnessing the poverty outside her window, she resolved to serve the destitute. Breaking away from the Loreto Order, Teresa founded her own congregation with Vatican approval by 1950. While her narrative highlights divine guidance, her decisions also reflected ambition and strategy. Establishing the Missionaries of Charity brought her influence that her teaching career could never provide. Teresa's path wasn't without personal struggles. Like many devout figures, she faced a dark night of the soul, a spiritual crisis where faith faltered. This echoes even Saint Theresa's doubts during her illness, as well as Teresa's private letters, revealing her inner turmoil over God's existence. Despite this, Teresa persisted, transforming a life of hardship into one of global impact. Her unwavering commitment to the poor and marginalized earned her admiration worldwide, solidifying her legacy as a symbol of selfless service. Mother Teresa, a name synonymous with compassion, had a surprising association with a self-proclaimed guru, John Roger Hinkins. Hinkins, leader of the cult MISA, Movement of Inner Spiritual Awareness, claimed a spiritual consciousness surpassing Jesus Christ. Yet, she accepted $10,000 and a Mesa Integrity Award from him. Journalist Christopher Hitchens, one of her fiercest critics, condemned her for accepting donations from dubious figures, but his aggressive tone often overshadowed his arguments. While it's undeniable she took money from questionable sources, the bigger issue lay in how those funds were used, or not used. Her famous Home for the Dying in Calcutta embodied her mission. Teresa claimed it offered dignity to the destitute in their final moments. Yet despite substantial donations, the hospice operated under dire conditions. Basic hygiene was neglected, beds overflowed, and needles were reused without sterilization, even during the peak of the HIV/AIDS crisis in India. A study from the University of Montreal revealed 2/3 of patients sought medical help, but many died without proper care, medicine, or even painkillers. Teresa believed suffering brought people closer to Christ, so pain relief was rarely offered. Critics reported tragic cases, like a boy denied life-saving antibiotics because the hospice refused to send him to a hospital. Teresa's financial practices were equally puzzling. Despite overseeing 517 missions worldwide, resources remained inadequate. Instead of building proper facilities, she offered prayers and medallions during disasters. Researchers suggested her foundation's millions were underutilized for humanitarian efforts, while she traveled first class and received top-tier medical care when ill. Her nuns endured similar hardships. Former members revealed strict rules, including self-flagellation, withholding family letters, and isolation for dissenters. Personal hygiene and recreation were minimal, with life dictated by suffering, work, and prayer. Some ex-nuns exposed these oppressive practices, describing their time as one of pain and submission. Teresa's views also stirred debate. Her anti-abortion stance dominated her 1979 Nobel Peace Prize speech, where she called abortion the greatest destroyer of peace. Her fame shielded her from scrutiny, much like other controversial figures of the time, leaving many of her actions unquestioned. Though she was celebrated as a savior, her practices and beliefs left a legacy that continues to spark fierce debate. Teresa's story is a reminder to look beyond public perception and question the reality behind the image. Mother Teresa, the woman whose name became synonymous with saintliness, was canonized in 2016 after an extraordinary journey of faith, miracles, and controversy. Her path to sainthood began right after her death in 1997, but the Vatican required proof of her heroic virtue. Her close associate, Brian Kolodiechuk, painstakingly gathered testimonies and documents to make the case. The first miracle attributed to her came from Monica Bezra in Bengal, who claimed a divine light from Teresa's photo cured her cancer. Beatified in 2003, Mother Teresa's sainthood became official after Pope Francis recognized a second miracle in 2015, where a man in Brazil was allegedly cured of a brain tumor through her intercession. Her legacy solidified globally. Kosovo built a cathedral in her honor, and her missionaries of charity expanded to over 5,000 members, running orphanages, clinics, and hospitals across 6 continents. Her fame wasn't just about her work, but also society's yearning for saintly figures, people who embody selflessness and bring hope amidst despair. Yet, the woman behind the myth, Angeze Gongsha, was far more complex. Critics like Christopher Hitchens called her a fraud, citing contradictions in her life. Despite her humble appearance, Teresa harbored immense ambition. Inspired by her hero, Thérèse of Lisieux, she pursued sainthood relentlessly, even admitting her desire to become a saint of darkness. However, behind the saintly facade lay troubling realities. She hoarded millions in Vatican accounts, accepted funds from criminals and dictators, and overlooked the suffering of those under her care. Many accused her of fostering an environment where young nuns endured abuse, and the funds meant for the poor often remained untouched. While not cruel or depraved like figures such as AnneHamilton-Byrne or Jimmy Savile, Mother Teresa encouraged the veneration of a carefully curated myth. In society's attempt to create saints, it sometimes crafts figures who are far from divine. On April 6, 1941, Adolf Hitler's Wehrmacht invaded Yugoslavia under Directive No. 25. Just a week earlier, a Serb-led military coup dethroned Regent Prince Paul, replacing him with 17-year-old King Peter II. This defiance enraged Hitler, prompting swift revenge. As the Axis forces stormed Yugoslavia, resistance was stronger than expected. To crush it, the Luftwaffe bombed major cities, including Sarajevo, where Joseph Kabiljo, a Jewish factory owner, lost everything. Homeless and desperate, Joseph crossed paths with Mustafa Hardaga, an old business associate. Mustafa welcomed Joseph and his family into his home, risking everything during a time when the simplest kindness could mean death. Despite cultural and religious differences, Joseph's family being Jewish and Mustafa's devoutly Muslim, the two families formed a bond. To make the Kabiljos comfortable, Mustafa's wife, Zegneba, and her sister-in-law stopped wearing their hijabs at home. As Yugoslavia fell under Axis rule, the fascist Ustaše regime targeted Jews and other minorities. Danger loomed near. Joseph's family even hid under a pile of coats when Ustaše police came knocking. Hoping for safety, Joseph moved his family to Mostar in Italian-occupied territory, leaving them temporarily to liquidate his business in Sarajevo. Unfortunately, he was betrayed, arrested, and sent to a forced labor camp. There, Joseph's fate took a turn when Zeyneba spotted him among the prisoners. Risking her life, she smuggled food and urged him to escape. Joseph managed to flee and hide with the Hardagas again before reuniting with his family in Mostar. Tragedy continued. In 1943, as Italy's surrender shifted power to the Ustaše, Mostar's Jews faced arrests. Joseph joined anti-fascist partisans and his family barely survived until the war's end. In 1945, they returned to Sarajevo, finding refuge again with the Hardagas. The cost of heroism was immense. Zagneba's father, Ahmed Sadiq, was executed at the Jasenovac concentration camp for hiding another Jewish family. In 1950, Joseph's family emigrated to Israel but never forgot their saviors. Years later, the Kabiljos successfully petitioned Yad Vashem to honor the Hardagas as righteous among the nations. History repeated itself during the Bosnian War in the 1990s. Serbian forces targeted Bosniak Muslims in genocidal campaigns, forcing thousands from their homes. The Hardagas, now victims, hid in a basement to escape persecution. When the Kabiljos learned of their plight, they mobilized the Israeli government to grant the Hardagas safe passage. In 1994, with Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's intervention, the Hardagas arrived in Jerusalem. This story transcends mere heroism. It exemplifies rare human decency in times of unthinkable evil. The Hardagas' actions were not motivated by reward, but by unwavering moral courage. They did what so many others did not. They stood against darkness, proving that even in the bleakest times, humanity can shine through. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden truths of history. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feedback in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Speaking History to stay updated with more episodes that explore the untold and unexpected sides of our past. Together, let's continue uncovering the stories that shaped the world. See you in the next episode.